in the book that you reference, for those tuning in on video, will see me doing the exploding head emoji, if you will. I loved that book. I
Thank you,
really
David.
liked that book. And the thing that really stood out to me was applying those hard facts about startups versus just acquiring a company that is already up and going and profitable. And so and this is something that you don't hear a lot about, especially in the e-commerce space. It is always start your own private label brand and grow and scale. And that's honestly, that's what I've been doing. That's what Ken has been doing. And reading your book gave me a total shift in the way that I thought about business. So what led you to writing that book?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks so much. I got to tell you that writing it took me about 4.5 years, and I wrote it primarily in the middle of the night. And so anytime someone says, I loved your book, it's a true shot in the arm, and I really appreciate it because I spent a lot of time wondering if I was just crazy, and I was like publishing sort of all of my faulty logic, right? And the concept being that when you release something that, a book like this that no one's really written, it's kind of like, how come no one's written this? How come no one sees this like I do, right? And it ended up being quite the opposite. And it's just been so well received, which has been an incredible experience. But so thank you. I used my MBA as a career shield to try to start a company while I was while my resume was protected by the fact that I was getting an MBA, right? So I spent a lot of time, and I went through, sort of the Olin Cup process at Washington University in St. Louis. And, we almost had a deal with Walmart, and we had licensed this technology, and we were trying to raise capital, and it was a roadshow, we were doing it, right? We're finalists in the business plan competition. And I saw people that I thought had a much better startup than we did, just sort of collapse, as we were continuing down the track. They were just sort of falling off left and right. And the ones that were sort of, that ended up sort of beating us, I was like, yeah, but those aren't going to make it. And they didn't, right? And ours fell completely apart, okay? And I've learned over time, in other words, I've spent a lot of time in the entrepreneurial community, and I have an MBA with a concentration in entrepreneurship. I am as big of a geeky fan as any entrepreneur in terms of getting the latest, copy of Inc. magazine and reading about what's the newest technology and how do I start and how do I do this and how do I, start a private label company and all the rest of it. And ultimately, I knew there was a way to buy an existing company, and I just didn't know how to do it. And so in 2004, I set out to try to do it, and there was no good resources, at all. And I went back and I started talking with some of my MBA professors who tried to talk me out of it. They were explaining to me that it was a really bad idea to go small. And that's when I really understood that the MBA was for middle management at large organizations. And entrepreneurship was a very recent thing in these programs, right? And so living in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I later knew that there was this whole business model that was just being completely ignored and undervalued. And you look at, say the names, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, just all of the big entrepreneurs that grace the covers of these magazines that we all sort of worship, right? These are not the 1%. These are the 0.0001%, right? I mean, it is it's one of these where starting a business from scratch is punishment for not understanding statistics. And yet we do it over and over and over. And I'm guilty. I'm guilty of it, right? And so I eventually figured out how to sort of navigate these private, opaque, fragmented marketplace and sort of buy my first company. But it took me 4 years, okay, from setting out to learn how to do it to actually acquiring one. So I owned that company and ran it for about 7 years and tried to grow through acquisition and ultimately sold to an acquisition target. And then I did what we all do. I went out and I had my first exit and I'm like, I am successful. Now I can do it. And we did a startup, raised capital, oversubscribed, recruited a executive from Microsoft to be our CEO. We're running beta programs at half a dozen major Fortune 500 companies. You would know the names. And we had the CTO of a major Fortune 500 company working with our dev team, and we were totally doing it this time, and we totally didn't. and so I then went out and was like, okay, I need to go back to where I have success, which is focusing on these base hits, right? And for me, it was kind of we've all seen that that movie or read the book Moneyball, right, by Michael Lewis, it's all about how the Boston Red Sox like they couldn't compete on getting home runs, so they just focused on getting on base. When I think about acquisition entrepreneurship, I actually call it like entremetrics, right? After sabermetrics in that book. It's basically getting on base. How do I get revenue? How do I get customers? How do I get product and infrastructure and all the rest of it first? And then once I've got all of that locked in, now we can get started, right? And so I started writing the book knowing that people around me were buying companies, and I knew it was happening coast to coast. I started like interviewing other people and wanting to make it about the movement. Like I didn't want to be the guy. And what I learned over time was that like if you really wanted to do that well, to write like a Jim Collins caliber book, you need like 24 Stanford PhDs on staff. Like it was just slow going. And every single person I talked to had a very anecdotal experience, right? It was like, oh, I just was looking for what everyone else is looking for. I was looking for, and then they would say something completely different, right? And then it was like, oh, I knew a guy who then introduced me to this lady who sold me this thing. Like it was just, everything was so messed up and all over the place. And there was no best practices that I could find. And it was just a great opportunity to kind of try to synthesize all of the information. And so during the time I wrote it, I was also acquiring multiple companies. And so all of a sudden, one day I looked in the mirror and I was like, look, just own it. Like I can be the guy. I'm on the list of people that can write this book. And so I did.